Hey, it's Avis with Altenew's Crafty Creator Team. I'm going to share advanced card folds you should try. I will provide all the measurements you need as well as what size envelopes they will fit in. Vertical Shadow Box. To create this vertical shadow box card, you'll need one piece of cardstock measuring at 5 by 7 inches, one piece measuring at 5 by 9 inches, scored at 2 inches on each side along the 9-inch edge, one piece measuring at 6 by 5 inches, scored at 1/2 of an inch on each side along the 6-inch edge, and two pieces measuring at 5 by 5 inches. I decorated the two pieces of cardstock measuring at 5 by 5 inches with the Cloud Scene Building stencil along with Tempest Teal and Fuchsia Fresh Dye inks. I temporarily adhered one of the pieces measuring at 5 by 5 inches and the piece measuring at 5 by 6 inches together and die cut a window from both pieces at the same time. Then I permanently adhered them together. I adhered the negative space to the center of the back wall of the piece of cardstock measuring at 5 by 9 inches. I cut a piece of acetate measuring at 1/4 of an inch by 7 inches and scored at 1 inch on each side. I adhered the piece of acetate to the center of the piece of cardstock measuring at 5 by 9 inches as shown. I added adhesive to the score lines measuring at 1/2 of an inch of the piece of cardstock measuring at 6 by 5 inches and adhered it to the piece of cardstock measuring at 5 by 9 inches to create a box. I decorated 2 hot air balloons from the Breezy Quest die set. I adhered one of the hot air balloons to the center of the acetate strip to make it appear as if it's floating. I applied adhesive to the bottom of the box and adhered it to the piece of cardstock measuring at 5 by 7 inches. Please ensure that you do not adhere the box upside down. I adhered the additional piece of cardstock measuring at 5 by 5 inches to the front of the card along with the additional hot air balloon that I made. I added the happy birthday sentiment from the Wings and Petals Craft Your Life project kit and some gem sparkles to complete this card. The card measures at 5 by 7 inches and will fit into an A7 envelope. Pop-out card. The card base measures at 10.5 by 6 inches and is scored at 1 3/4, 3.5, and 5.25 inches on one side and 3.5 inches on the other side along the 10.5-inch edge. I flipped the card base over to reinforce the score lines to help with folding. Fold score lines forward, back, forward, back. Move card base over to 2.5 inches along the 6-inch edge and cut from the first score line to the third score line. Then flip card base over and repeat on the other side. Push the opening forward to create the pop-out feature. I made my own patterned paper with the Sweater Knits stencil and Cloud White pigment ink. I cut down 2 panels measuring at 1.5 by 5 3/4 inches, 4 panels measuring at 1.5 by 2 1/4 inches, 2 panels measuring at 1.5 by 3/4 inch, and 1 panel measuring at 3 1/4 inches by 5 3/4 inches. I adhered the 2 panels measuring at 1.5 by 5 3/4 inches to the outer and inner wings. I adhered the 4 panels measuring at 1.5 by 2 1/4 inches to the 4 sections created by the pop-out cut, and the 2 panels measuring at 1.5 by 3/4 inch to the pop-out feature. I used a small circle die to make a partial cut to the center of the far right edge of the panel measuring at 3 1/4 inches by 5 3/4 inches to create a sentiment pocket. I then adhered it to the back wall of the card base. I inked up the festive triangles with embossing ink. Covered the stamped images with antique silver embossing powder, and then I heat set them. I double stacked the triangles to help with warping. I adhered the peace and joy sentiment from the Timeless Sentiments die set holiday edition to the pop-out feature of the card and decorated the card base with the festive triangles and some crystal clear enamel dots. I cut down a piece of cardstock measuring at 2 3/4 inches by 5 inches to fit inside the sentiment pocket. The card measures at 3.5 by 6 inches and will fit into an A6 envelope. Trifold shutter card. The card base measures at 5.5 by 10.5 inches. Place card base in paper trimmer, move to 1 1/4 inches along the 5.5 inch edge and cut from 1 3/4 inches to 8 3/4 inches. Flip card base over and repeat on the other side. Score card base at 1 3/4 inches between the cut lines on each side. Make full score lines at 3.5 inches on each side along the 10.5 inch edge. Fold one of the 3.5 inch score lines forward and the other 3.5 inch score line back. Fold the partial score lines back, forward, back, forward. Then pull the first full score line forward and the second full score line back. I made my own patterned paper with floral serenade press plate and rose gold hot foil. I cut down 2 panels measuring at 1.5 inches by 5 1/4 inches, 4 panels measuring at 1.5 inches by 1 inch, 2 panels measuring at 1.5 inches by 2 3/4 inches, 2 panels measuring at 3 1/4 inches by 1 inch, and 1 panel measuring at 3 1/4 inches by 2 3/4 inches. I adhered the 2 panels measuring at 1.5 inches by 5 1/4 inches to the outer wings. The 4 panels measuring at 1.5 inches by 1 inch to the top and bottom sections next to the wings. The panels measuring at 1.5 by 2 3/4 inches to the sections in between the panels measuring at 1.5 inches by 1 inch. The 2 panels measuring at 3 1/4 inches by 1 inch to the sections above and below the center of the card base, and the panel measuring at 3 1/4 inches by 2 3/4 inches to the center of the card base. I changed the center panel so the center element would show up better. I used ivory black foil on jet black cardstock to add a little bit of interest and adhered it over the top of the other panel. I used the Butterfly Dreams Mini Delight and the So Very Thankful sentiment from the Flower Arch Craft Your Life project kit to complete this card. The card measures at 3.5 by 5.5 inches and will fit into an A2 envelope. Standard shadow box. You'll need 2 pieces of cardstock measuring at 8 by 5 inches, scored at 1.5 inches on each side along the 8-inch edge, and 1 piece measuring at 6 by 5 inches, scored at 1/2 inch on each side along the 6-inch edge. Fold all score lines forward. I die cut a window using a circle nesting die from one of the pieces measuring at 8 by 5 inches and the piece measuring at 6 by 5 inches by lining the 2 pieces up and temporarily adhering them together while passing it through my die cutting machine. I decorated the negative space with the delightfully dotty press plate and rose gold hot foil. I decorated the window from the piece measuring at 8 by 5 inches with the leaves from the Prairie Rose layering die set. I trimmed down a piece of acetate to 1/2 inch by 4 3/4 inches and adhered it to the back center of the window of the piece of cardstock measuring at 6 by 5 inches. Then I adhered the Celebrate sentiment from the Wings and Petals Craft Your Life project kit to the piece of acetate to make it appear as if it's floating. I adhered the piece of cardstock measuring at 6 by 5 inches to the windowless piece of cardstock measuring at 8 by 5 inches by folding it to one side, adding adhesive to the 1/2 inch fold, and folding the side piece over. This will ensure that the card will fold flat. I repeated that process on the other side. Then I repeated the whole entire process when I added the piece measuring at 8 by 5 inches to complete the shadow box. The card measures at 6.5 by 5 inches and will fit into an A7 envelope when folded flat. Double Gatefold Shadow Box Card. The card base measures at 11 by 5.5 inches and is scored at 1 3/4 and 3.5 inches on each side along the 11-inch edge. Fold the inner score lines forward and the outer score lines back. I made my own patterned paper with rose gold shimmer relief paste and cascading elegance background stencil. I trimmed down 2 pieces of cardstock measuring at 7.5 by 1 1/4 inches and scored at 4 and 5 3/4 inches while I waited for the shimmer paste to dry. I will refer to these as borders. Once the paste dried, I cut 4 panels measuring at 1.5 inches by 5 1/4 inches, 4 panels measuring at 1.5 inches by 1 inch, and 2 panels measuring at 3 3/4 inches by 1 inch. I adhered the 2 panels measuring at 3 3/4 inches by 1 inch to the 4 by 1 inch portions of the borders and the 4 panels measuring at 1.5 inches by 1 inch to the inner and outer outside edges of the borders. I adhered the outer wing of the border to the inside wall of the card base and the other side of the border to the left outer wing. I repeated that process for the other border but in reverse. I then adhered the 2 remaining panels measuring at 1.5 inches by 5 1/4 inches to the outer wings. I used the Bright Bloom layering dies set and the Shine Bright sentiment from the Timeless Sentiments Holiday Edition to complete this card. The card measures at 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches and will fit into an A2 envelope. And those are advanced unique folds you should try. Which unique fold is your favorite?
Loved watching this video. There is more where that came from here on the Altenew official YouTube channel. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that bell button so you don't miss out on any of the crafty fun. See you soon and happy crafting.